Before we begin, thank you very much to, and I apologize if I butcher this, Mitra Moon for contributing over on Ko-fi. Thank you very much for pitching in. Very, very appreciated. I was not aware people could send messages on Ko-fi because I've not really read that many Ko-fis. So, been watching your content for a long time and I always look forward to seeing what topics you pull out next. Keep creating, keep being amazing. Thank you very much. I try. I try. We've been at it for closing in on 1,400 days in a row, closing in on 4 years of daily content. Gets tricky, but Transformers has a lot to talk about, so we are still going. Thank you for sticking around for so long. So, for today, we are going to be discussing the unfortunate news that came down. The director of Transformers 1, Josh Cooley, did confirm that Paramount has no plans for a sequel to Transformers 1, which is tremendously disappointing because it is a really, really good Transformers movie. And it gave us something that we really have lacked in the fandom, which is a jumping on point for brand new people. It has become the thing that you show to a interested person who is not yet a fan. Like, here you go. This is a generalized version of technically all the origins, and then you can kind of splice out what is what from there. But for the most part, the movie itself is really well made. There's a really good story to it. It tells a good origin story to Transformers that gets the gist of just about everything. You know, Orion Pax, the lesser class in Cybertron that Megatron rose from, the Matrix, the Quintessons, etc., etc. It's a great way of doing an introduction to the franchise, even if it's doing its own thing and isn't set in any one particular universe. It's still really, really solid. So it's unfortunate that we're not going to get a sequel to expand on what could have been a really promising and enjoyable universe. It's unfortunate that Paramount learned way too late that this is the kind of Transformer movie that we've been wanting. You know, like something that doesn't rely on a human cast. Not that a human cast is bad, but a lot of times they have not been portrayed well. They have not been handled well. I like the robots to be the main character. I don't want the humans to be the main characters because the robots are too expensive to show on screen for too long. You know, so fully animated. And it worked. It worked really, really well. I mean, you can't be surprised. You just cannot be surprised. You know, I feel like everything went downhill. Like, obviously things went downhill rapidly with The Last Night, but even before that, even Age of Extinction did not do as well as the previous movie. But it was just a little bit, but it was falling off. And there's just one bad movie after another. And then we had Bumblebee, and Bumblebee got a lot of goodwill back. And then they went right back to the formula everyone was tired of with Rise of the Beast, and that burned everybody out. And then to do this movie so close after Rise of the Beast, in a really bad slot, by the way. Every time I bring up why this movie failed, everyone brings up, like, it was up against really bad competition, and it was a bad time of year for the movie, because it came out when all the kids were still in school. It's all correct. Like, it's not something you can pin down on a single person or reason. It is an entire cluster of things that came together into this one little, like, ball of failure. And that's unfortunately what Transformers 1 dealt with. But it does kind of bring up to mind, like, well, what could have been? And we will talk what could have been. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ways you could have taken the story, but there's a few obvious things that you have to address coming off of movie number 1. Things like Optimus Prime himself. And this would have been interesting because it would have shown a story that we very rarely get in Transformers, which is the early years of Optimus Prime being in charge of the planet Cybertron and the Autobots. You know, we don't typically get that. We got a little bit sometimes in the comic books, but this would have been a real approach of just like how Optimus Prime handled suddenly being in charge of the entirety of the planet Cybertron, as well as now dealing with a war against this opposing faction, the brand new christened Decepticons. This gets tricky. This gets very tricky. You could do a lot with a story like that. And here's the scary part. And I know there's some people out here who are not going to want to hear this, but it is the truth, so we got to say it. He would look a lot like Optimus Prime. It really would. It really would. Rodimus' story, and the way he was supposed to be different from Optimus Prime, is he's young in his role as the leader. So he's putting on this outward face when the reality is he's still not confident in what he can do, right? So this Optimus is still living up to the 13 Primes, that came before him. And, in particular, Zeta Prime, who held the Matrix prior to Sentinel trying to claim it for himself. That's a lot to live up to. And since it is the Matrix leadership, lore-wise, he could be in touch with some of them to really put on some extra pressure as to what he's supposed to live up to. This is a lost opportunity at what would have been a unique look at Optimus Prime and like his youngest years of being in command of the Autobots. Because it wouldn't be the strong, courageous, confident Optimus Prime. Courageous, yes, but confident? He's still finding his footing. He's still trying to figure out what exactly to do with what he has been handed. You would have Elita 1 as the one with a head on her shoulders, much as she was in the first movie. There would likely be a budding relationship between the two forming. There's indication of that in movie 1. Obviously, the way Transformer fiction tends to go, that's just a thing. She is the love interest, one way or another. Though they're very, weirdly cagey about it every single time. They never outright say it. They never outright throw it out there, except in G1. But they're not, married. They're not Conjux and Dura. They're nothing like that. It's just, I love how, in Earthspark, they was it's complicated. I don't want to stick her in, a stereotypical female role, is the thing. And in Transformers 1, she kind of was, because they wanted to do that badass female character who has her head on her shoulders and is actually, the serious one of the group. And that is something of a trope. I think the more egregious thing is that her rival in the movie, the villain, the Decepticon they gave her to fight, was another badass female. I don't like that. That's basically to say, we're gonna make a character just for you to fight that's gonna be on your level. Elita 1 should be above that. Say what you want about writing on Earthspark. She's written better there because she isn't just tussling with Arachnid and Black Arachnia and Nightbird or whoever else they would have added for that role. No, she's mixing up with Swindle and Hardtop right beside Optimus Prime. That's kind of how this should be. She should be the supportive one who's keeping Optimus together despite his uncertainties about his role. But she should also just have some kind of agency herself. She shouldn't just be the girlfriend character, So she gets tricky too. Bumblebee, on the other hand, is actually kind of easy. He just needs a growth arc. He needed an arc to actually grow into the more confident warrior that we know him as, the one who's kind of brash and cocky. He needed a way of getting rid of B-127, or whatever nickname he came up with for that movie. Being in a position of some authority that Optimus would have put him in, you could have him being made fun of. You could have him being picked on. Imagine having a story where he was amongst the other Autobots who would have joined in. I would imagine a sequel to have more of an ensemble cast where more characters were shown with names. Jazz, Ratchet, Hound, Wheeljack. We saw a bunch of them. Just to have them around and active amongst everyone, not necessarily in talking roles or even more talkative. They're more talkative than they were in the previous movie, but definitely not main characters or anything like that. They're just kind of there. They don't need to be focused on in any way outside of maybe a few joining the cast. I would have Jazz and RC, I would have join like the main crew for the Autobots. Throw someone else in there, like maybe I don't know, maybe a Wheeljack or a Ratchet, something like that. But for the most part, for Bumblebee, if you write a story where he's getting picked on because he's just not up for the job Prime's given him, what you do is you have him earn the name Bumbler. He's a bumbler. You know, not just to say like he's a bug from Earth, but it's just to say he's, he is clumsy and awkward. So, Bumbler, or shortened, Bumblebee. You have a growth arc where like he does kind of grow into this more confident character that you know him in, in most media, and you have him own that title. You have him take that mockery and you have him like hone it into an actual identity. Like this is who you think a Bumblebee is. Fine, I'll be Bumblebee and I'll show you who Bumblebee is. And then you just have him go on a tear. Let him grow. Let him evolve. Let him transform. Ooh. Now, Megatron is the other one, and really Megatron just needs to be in some kind of villainous role. I don't think he needs to have like any kind of character arc or growth to him. He has a natural authority and command to him. I don't think you need to see that. You might need to see him put Starscream in his place once or twice, but that's maybe it, just to show that he is carrying his authority. But I don't really think you need to have like some big character growth arc for him. He just needs to be an antagonistic role. And what I have in mind, if I were to write it out, what I want done with the movie, we'll do a little bit of fanficking, because I know you guys like when I come up with this stuff, what I would do with these characters and my stories I would write. So we'll do a little bit of that. We'll do a little bit of that. But the first thing we would have to do is focus on the Quintessons, because that is obviously the huge plot point that leaves off from the previous movie. That's still the looming threat in the universe. That is still what the Transformers, one way or another, are going to have to face. Now that Sentinel Prime is out of the picture and they have lost their gravy train of Energon, they're going to come in full force to figure out what went wrong. We will have to deal with a Quintesson army, and through that, we will have to find not only a leader of the Quintessons, because really, it's a commander that we got to meet in the first movie. I would imagine something more traditional of a five-faced Quint would probably be properly in charge of all this. And that would have to be your main antagonist for the movie, not necessarily Megatron. Because we still got to market Megatron, and there's still a little bit we can do with him in his past. So, for instance, if the Quintessons are the big threat, they are a Cybertron-wide threat, does not matter. And keep in mind, Megatron is a character who is driven by his rage and his hatred. And while a lot of that was directed at Sentinel for enslaving their kind, and honestly, rightfully so, he would also direct a lot of that at the Quintessons that also did the enslaving, who are ultimately responsible for that. So, yeah, I think this is a situation where, like, early in the movie, you would see a conflict between Autobot and Decepticon to establish that that's what's going on Cybertron all the time now. But you would have to have a Megatron begrudgingly agree to work alongside Optimus Prime to handle the Quintesson issue. And this does give you a few opportunities, like brief moments where the Autobots and Decepticons have to coexist. Maybe there are Autobot characters who start seeing things the Decepticons' way. Or you could seed characters on one side and then have them switch over. And just to kind of make the intermingling interesting. You could have spies for the Decepticons on the Autobot side. Like, hey, we just got this brand new Autobot. His name's Reflector. And there's two of his brothers here. He's a triplet. It's not going to last. It's not going to last long. You could play that. The big reason why we play it like this is because I want to have Optimus do the Optimus thing. I don't want him to just have banter with Elita 1 about how, like, unconfident he is in his leadership role of the planet. I want him to try and get Megatron back. I want him to actually try to get Megatron back to being D16, to see the things that they used to see together, to be like the the bonded brothers that they were at one time. You could have, like, if the two are begrudgingly working together, like, Megatron would have to calm down and try and cooperate here. You have moments where maybe they do remember their friendship. Maybe there is something left of D16 in there. Or maybe Megatron discovers something that brings a little bit of power into this, and you know what power does. It definitely did it to him in the first movie. This is where I would introduce something that I'm kind of sick of as a MacGuffin, but frankly, this makes too much sense. That would be the Allspark. Not with this Starscream, obviously, but like glowy cube Allspark. Because multiple things come to mind here. For instance, we have things like, not just like what the Allspark typically means of like how powerful it is, but like we do kind of have to explain where Transformers come from on the metal planet. Obviously, they are born on the planet. Their bodies are built because Sentinel can just take their cogs before they come online. So obviously there is something to that. So we can defer something that they are built on Cybertron, are still currently being built, because you do have Transformers much younger than other ones. So, to play into that, you could have a well of Allspark in Cybertron that kind of explains where the life force of these Transformers comes from. But since the planet has both a bottom layer and a top layer, you could actually explain that, like, it's coming from the surface. So it's on the top layer coming down. So the well of Allsparks is actually going outward, outside the planet. Meaning the Allspark would be somewhere on the surface. And I bring up the surface because that's another thing that would have to be kind of addressed. It's wild, it's untamed, there is living, growing metal across the surface of the planet. You have life forms that actually survive on the surface, plant life even. It's a very unique environment, and we didn't really get a lot of time to explore it. But I would also like to try and work a story in to explain why it's so wild and untamed, and what exactly you could have to kind of get it to be the Cybertron we know. These sprawling cities that are, in the visible sky, visible like spacescape of the stars and everything, above. Get it back, get it to a point where it's a more recognizable Cybertron. And my idea is thus: I want the Quintessons to be involved in the creation of Transformers. They could have created the original, the 13, for instance. Just seed this living planet with metallic life forms, and just come back and see what they've done in time for them to be useful to them. But for this, the idea I had was that the Allspark is divided. It's cut in two. And the Quintessons use the part they have in order to actually create the Transformers that first went to this planet. But the other half is stored at the other end of the Well of Allsparks. And that is what's been not only generating life for all these Transformers that are being created, it's also allowing them, it's also causing all this wildlife to happen on the surface. This like more chaotic, constant reshaping of the planet, etc. Because it's broken, it's kind of going out of control. So it needs a place where all that is amplified somehow to cover the entire planet. The thought is, what if there's a Titan? What if the thing that Megatron discovers isn't just the Allspark, but the fact that there's a Titan dormant on the surface of the planet that is acting as the Well of Allsparks, containing the planet's life force? What if? What if? This could be a really cool trick, especially if you consider, like, toward the end of the movie. Because here's the thing. This is what I want the climax to be. I want this gigantic Titan of a Transformer to be under Megatron's control somehow. And, like, the trick here is, like, how do we actually beat something that big? And the honest thing you could do, the thing that comes to mind is, I want Optimus to beat the scenario in a way other than just straight up a fight. I want him to beat Megatron in a fight at the end, yes, but I don't want him to overcome Metroplex through combat. I want him to do it the Optimus Prime way. I want him to talk it out. I want him to give one of his speeches, like where Metroplex might have come online, believing, Megatron making him believe that, like, the Autobots were the ones that were helping Sentinel Prime and the Quintessons. They must be destroyed. I would rather that and Optimus Prime serve as a counter voice to try and get Metroplex on their side, or to at the very least make his own decision and not be influenced by what Megatron's claiming. Either way, the defeat of Megatron comes with the fact that Metroplex is sided with Optimus Prime. Metroplex stands with the last Prime. So, the only thing here that I don't like, but it's required, is that somewhere in all of this, Megatron has to commit an atrocity. Through all of this combat and everything, whatever we see Optimus Prime trying to do to get Megatron back to being who he was, to let go of this anger and his need for vengeance, and just be himself again, be the person that was Orion's best friend. He needs to do something that crosses the line. And I really don't want to say kill Alita. That does play into the fact that Alita doesn't show up in much overall fiction in general Transformer origin stories. But she does now. So I don't think they would do that. And again, that lumps her into the a more stereotypical female trope of we've made a character to get emotionally attached to the main hero just to kill her off for emotional effect. I don't want to do that. It might have to be something as crass as Megatron might end the fight by just firing into Metroplex and blowing up the Allspark, literally cutting them off from being able to create more Transformers, aside from our B team, literally our B team, recovering the shard from the Quintessons and giving them some hope of restoring their planet and still creating Transformer life. But Megatron has to do something so bad that any story moving forward, Optimus is just he's too far gone. D16's dead. I can't reach him anymore. He's just Megatron. I don't know. I'm not completely sold on that, but I feel like that's where the finale would have to be. There'd have to be some kind of bittersweetness to the ending of this one to kind of drive home the fact that, this is going to lead to millions of years of war, as most Transformer stories do. And ultimately, Megatron can't be redeemable. Yes, and I'm an Autobot Megatron fan, and that's the point of Autobot Megatron. He's not redeemable, even though he tries. It's one thing that even Earthspark kind of struggled to do. That Megatron might be redeemable. I don't think this one should be. So I don't know exactly how you get there, but that's what I think you would need to do in order to set up a potential third movie and get Megatron to be the villain. Because we have to deal with the Quintessons first before Megatron can be the villain. So that's the direction I would have to go. And that's about what I've got for this. There's a lot of potential left on the table. That's kind of what I would do with it. Honestly, if I could pen out a whole story, I probably would. But from the moment, it's just a little bit to talk about. It's a little bit to speculate on. What do you think would have been the sequel to Transformers 1? Had it ever been possible? Because right now, it doesn't look like we are ever going to see this universe continue. So, might as well fanfic a little bit and play around in what could have been. So, there's the ideas for the day. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.